The merit of details. The tower of glass and steel pierced the low-hanging clouds, a monument to ambition and wealth. Within its gleaming walls, the air hummed with the silent, frantic energy of high finance, of deals made and broken with a handshake or an email. But long before the first executive stepped out of the elevator, and long after the last one had departed for dinner in the city, another kind of energy moved through the spaces. It was quiet, methodical, and utterly essential. This was the domain of Maria. Her footsteps, cushioned by worn-out sneakers, made no sound on the plush carpet of the 30th floor. The scent of lemon and pine followed her like a ghost, a clean, chemical ghost that erased the day's transgressions of coffee spills and dusty shoes. Her hands, encased in yellow rubber gloves, were a study in efficient motion. A spray, a wipe, a polish, a straightening. She knew every contour of the vast, open-plan office, every stubborn stain on the break-room counter, every whisper the old heating pipes emitted in the deep winter night. And she knew Mr. Harrington. To the world, Julian Harrington was a titan. His face, sharp and commanding, occasionally graced the business magazines left discarded on the mahogany tables in the lobby. In the office, he was a force of nature, a whirlwind of decisiveness and impatience that either inspired his employees or crushed them. To Maria, he was a pair of expensive Italian loafers she had to polish around, a voice that never addressed her directly but often spoke about her. "Make sure this is actually clean this time," he'd say to his assistant, not even glancing in Maria's direction as she wiped down the conference table. Or, "Has the cleaning staff been in here? It smells common." His words were never shouts, but they were barbs, tiny, precise insults that never drew blood but left 1,000 small scars on her spirit. She would simply nod, her eyes fixed on the gleaming surface of the wood, her heart a tight, hard knot in her chest. She'd wait for the door to click shut behind him, before she allowed herself a single, deep breath, the kind that fought back the heat behind her eyes. Then, she would continue her work. She had 2 children at home, their futures balanced on the modest paycheck this job provided. Their dreams were the fuel that kept her hands moving, even when her pride begged her to stop. Her sanctuary was the small, windowless janitor's closet. It was a world of mops and buckets, of shelves lined with solvents and soaps. Here, the scent of lemon was overwhelming, not a ghost but a presence. Here, she kept a small thermos of sweet, strong coffee, and a photograph of her children, Sophia and Matteo, tucked inside her locker door. Their smiling faces were the light in her dim world. One Thursday evening, the air in the office was different. The usual post-departure.com was replaced by a tense, frantic energy that had lingered like a bad odor. Mr. Harrington's door was closed, but she could hear the low, furious rumble of his voice. Through the glass walls, she saw him pacing, his phone pressed to his ear, his free hand chopping the air. His inner circle, a few sharp-suited VPs stood around, looking like statues, pale and rigid. Maria kept her head down, emptying trash bins with practiced silence. She moved from desk to desk, a specter of service in the drama of corporate crisis. She didn't understand the language they spoke, terms like merger, due diligence, and projections, but she understood the language of fear. It was universal. As she emptied the bin next to the desk of Mr. Harrington's young, perpetually flustered financial analyst, a crumpled ball of paper, different from the rest, caught her eye. It was a page from a legal pad, torn not neatly, but with angry, jagged force. Most would have seen nothing but trash. But Maria saw everything. It was her job to see the details others missed. A smudge on a screen, a scuff on a floor, a pattern of disorder. Smoothing the paper on her cart, she saw columns of numbers, some circled violently, with furious question marks scrawled in the margin. At the top, written in a hasty hand, were the words, Q3 divergence, can't be right, check source data. The numbers meant nothing to her, but the emotion behind the pen did. It was a silent scream of confusion, a tiny piece of a puzzle that was causing the earthquake in Mr. Harrington's office. She almost threw it away. It was not her place. Her place was too clean to be invisible. But the memory of her son Matteo, struggling with his math homework last week, flashed in her mind. He'd been so frustrated, on the verge of tears, until she'd sat down with him. She hadn't solved the problems for him, but she'd helped him trace his steps, find where he'd made a small addition error. You have to go back to the beginning. Mu amor, she had told him. The mistake is never at the end. It's always at the start. Something in her stirred. A compulsion. A foolish, dangerous curiosity. Later, when the office was finally, truly empty, the silence felt heavy. Mr. Harrington and his team had departed, leaving behind a cloud of expensive cologne and despair. Maria stood in the middle of the empty floor, the hum of the servers the only sound. Her cart was stocked, her duties half finished. But instead of moving towards the break room, her feet carried her to the analyst's desk. It was a mess of papers, files, and 2 large computer monitors. It was not her job. It was a line she had never crossed. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of insubordination. She touched the mouse. The screen flickered to life, asking for a password she did not have. Defeated, she was about to turn away when her eye caught the edge of a printed spreadsheet peeking out from under a financial journal. It was titled Q3 Consolidated Financials. For merger review. The numbers were dizzying, vast landscapes of decimals and commas, but Maria's world was built on order. She organized chaos for a living. Her eyes, trained to spot a single thread on a dark carpet, began to move across the page, not for meaning, but for pattern. And then she saw it. A series of figures in the regional sales southeast column. They were clean, rounded numbers. Too clean. In a sea of complex, messy data, they stood out like perfect, identical stones on a ragged beach. $250,000, $250,000, $250,000, every month, exactly the same. It was a detail a hype-powered executive, looking at the bottom line, might miss. But Maria, who balanced her own meager budget to the last penny, knew that life wasn't that neat. Business wasn't that neat. Variability was the only constant. A cold certainty settled in her stomach. This was the divergence. This was the mistake at the beginning. But what could she do? She was Maria, the cleaner. She couldn't walk into Mr. Harrington's office tomorrow and point to a spreadsheet. He would have her escorted from the building by security, her final paycheck mailed to her without a word. She spent the rest of her shift in a daze, her body performing its duties on autopilot while her mind raced. It was in the closet, as she was coiling the cord of the vacuum cleaner, that she saw it. Tucked on a high shelf, behind spare light bulbs, was an old, forgotten company directory. It was from 2 years ago, dusty and obsolete. She pulled it down on a whim, its pages fluttering, and there, listed under internal audit, was a name she vaguely remembered, Anya Sharma, a serious, kind-faced woman who had once thanked Maria for finding her lost earring. She had left the company over a year ago, but the directory listed her personal email, a relic from a more informal time. It was an insane risk, a leap into the abyss. That night, in her small apartment, the sounds of the city, a distant rumble, she sat at her kitchen table. The children were asleep. The crumpled piece of paper and a hastily scribbled copy of the suspicious numbers sat before her. She typed a careful, hesitant email on her old phone. Dear Ms. Sharma, you may not remember me. I am Maria, the cleaner from Harrington Financial. I am sorry to disturb you, but I think there is a problem. She described what she had seen, not pretending to understand it, but simply stating the facts of the pattern. The perfect, repeating numbers, the panic in the office. She sent it off into the digital void, expecting nothing but silence. The next day, the office was a tomb. Mr. Harrington was sequestered, the rumor mill swirling with talk of a doomed merger, of massive financial discrepancies, of impending layoffs. Maria moved through the day, a knot of anxiety in her stomach. In the afternoon, as she was refilling the paper towel dispenser in the restroom, her cheap phone buzzed, an unknown number. With trembling hands, she answered, "Hello, Maria, it's Anya Sharma." The voice was warm, professional, and urgent. "Your email was astonishing. I ran those figures by a colleague. You were right. That pattern is a classic red flag for fabricated data. It's likely a dummy entry, a placeholder someone forgot to replace with real numbers, and it's been auto-populating, inflating the revenue projections for that division for months. It's a catastrophic error. They have to trace it back to the original source, data entry. Probably a server glitch or a lazy intern from quarters ago." Maria leaned against the cool tile wall, her legs weak. "So, what do I do?" "You have to tell someone, Maria." "They will not listen to me," Maria whispered, the old shame rising in her throat. "Make them listen," Anya said, her voice firm. "The entire company is on the line. You have the truth. Sometimes that's the only weapon you need. The hours dragged on. Maria's shift ended. But she did not leave. She pretended to be finishing up, polishing the same spot on the reception desk over and over, her heart thundering. She saw the VPs file out, their faces grim. Finally, she heard the click of his office door. Julian Harrington emerged, looking like a man who had aged 10 years in a day. His tie was loose, his jacket slung over his shoulder. He walked with the heavy gait of defeat, his eyes on the floor, not seeing her, not seeing anything. It was now or never. She stepped out from behind the desk, her rubber sole squeaking on the floor. "Mr. Harrington," he stopped, startled, as if noticing a piece of furniture had spoken. His eyes focused on her, and for the first time, he truly saw her, not as part of the scenery, but as a person. And in his eyes, she saw not anger, but a deep, exhausted impatience. "What is it?" he asked, his voice flat, drained of its usual power. "Sir, I could not help but overhear there is a problem with the numbers." A flicker of annoyance. "That's none of your concern. You can go home." He made to move past her, but she stood her ground, a feat of incredible courage. "The Southeast numbers said the regional sales, they are all the same, every month, 250,000. Exactly. It is not normal." Harrington froze. He turned back to her slowly, his brow furrowed in utter confusion. "What did you just say?" She repeated it, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. "The numbers are too perfect, sir. My son, he does math. Life is not perfect. Business is not perfect. There are always decimals, always differences. These numbers, they are a lie." For a long, terrifying moment, he just stared at her. His analytical mind, so prized and feared, was connecting dots at a speed she could scarcely imagine. The discrepancy, the regional data, the impossible consistency. He saw it. He saw the ghost in the machine that his entire team of highly paid experts had missed, because they were looking at complex algorithms and not at the simple, elegant truth of a pattern. His face changed. The exhaustion was washed away by a wave of stunned disbelief. "Show me," he commanded, his voice a hoarse whisper. He followed her to the analyst's desk. She pointed to the printed spreadsheet, her finger tracing the column of identical figures. He leaned in, his eyes wide. He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. "Williams, it's Harrington. Drop everything. I want a full forensic dive on the Q3 Southeast regional data entries. I want to see the source of every single entry for the last 3 quarters. Look for a pattern. Look for anything that repeats exactly." He listened for a moment, his eyes locked on Maria. "Because I have a source that says it's wrong." He ended the call. The silence that followed was immense. He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the intelligence in her eyes, the quiet dignity in her posture. The years of his own dismissals reflected back at him. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice quiet, different. "Maria, sir. Maria," he repeated, as if learning a new word. He gave a short, disbelieving shake of his head. "Wait here, please." She waited for an hour, standing in the empty office, watching the city lights come on below. Finally, his phone rang. She heard his voice, sharp, then elated, then furious. "They found it. A corrupted data feed from an old server. It's been inputting the same placeholder figure for months. That's it. That's the whole." He burst out of his office, his face alight with a ferocious joy. He strode over to her, and for a horrifying second, she thought he might embrace her. He stopped short, instead extending his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she took it, her small, work-roughened hand disappearing in his. "Maria," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you have no idea. You've just saved this company. You've saved the merger. You've saved everything." He looked around the office, as if seeing the very air for the first time. "This is unacceptable. This ends now. Starting Monday, you are no longer a member of the cleaning staff. I want you upstairs. I'll create a position for you. Quality control, data auditing, something where that eye of yours can be put to proper use. The salary, it will be life-changing. You will never have to clean another floor again." He smiled, a generous, triumphant smile, expecting tears of gratitude. He was offering her the dream, escape, validation, revenge, even, for all those years of humiliation. Maria listened to his words. She let them wash over her, this vision of a new life, of financial security beyond her dreams. She pictured her children in a nicer apartment, with new clothes, She pictured the stunned faces of the other executives. She pictured never again smelling of lemon and pine. And she found, to her own surprise, that the picture did not fit. She looked at her cart, at her worn sneakers, at the photograph of her children she kept in her pocket. She thought of the quiet satisfaction of a well-polished surface, of a room put to rights by her own hands. She thought of her worth, not as he defined it by a title or a salary, but as she knew it in her soul. She looked up at Julian Harrington and met his gaze, not as an employee to an employer, but as one human being to another. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice quiet but clear as crystal in the silent office. "It is a very kind offer. But I must say no." His smile vanished, replaced by utter bewilderment. "No, Maria, you don't understand. This is a fortune. This is respect." "I understand, sir," she said, "but the respect I need, I must have for myself. I did not find that mistake because I am a data auditor. I found it because I am a cleaner. I see the details others miss. This is the job I have. This is the job I do well. I will not take a job I did not earn, for a reason that is not my own merit. My merit is here." She gestured to the spotless office around them. "I do not want a reward for seeing what was always there. I only wanted to help, and I have. That is enough." Harrington was speechless. He looked at this small, formidable woman who had just refused a king's ransom on a point of principle he could barely comprehend. He saw a strength in her that dwarfed his own, an integrity that was unshakable. The humiliations of the past, the thoughtless comments, the dismissals, they seemed to hang in the air between them, small and tawdry. He slowly nodded, a deep, newfound respect dawning in his eyes. Then, "Thank you, Maria, truly." She gave a small, graceful nod of her own. "Good night, Mr. Harrington." She turned, walked back to her cart, and pushed it towards the closet. She did not look back. She had given him back his company. And in doing so, she had found something far more valuable: herself. The elevator descended, carrying a Titan who had been humbled, and a cleaner who stood taller than ever before. The glass tower continued to pierce the clouds, but within it, a small, essential truth had been remembered: that dignity is not given by a title, but built, day by day, with our own hands.